Next, let's look inside the star at the layout. In order to constantly make the small changes that keep your star sailing at maximum speed, it's important to have the control lines for the sail trim and mast bend readily accessible, and the systems must work smoothly with a minimum of friction. If you have to struggle with an inefficient control, you are less likely to make a change that will help your boat speed. Vince explains the layout of his star.
This is a Traveler, which I don't use very often. I have the Cunningham, the mainsail Cunningham, the lever aft, which I use to hold the mast when it's real rough and the mast would tend to pump a little bit. And this is the jib car in and out, and the jib car fore and aft. This is all the controls I have over here on the side. In the center, in the barney post, I have, in the back of the barney post, I have the mast rake, which is also not used very often.
But you have a mark on that, just a standard position.
That's correct. And I have the boom vang, jib halyard, mast lever, forward, and the out haul.
Okay, and where's your hiking strap? You have a hiking strap?
My hiking strap is way back there, behind the tiller.
Okay.
In the front of the console, I have, of course, both backstays. Yeah. And this is a JC strap, which is a connect to the short cord, and this is the jib tack, which I adjust like before the race. I would adjust to get the jib up from the deck if it's light winds, and I bring the jib all the way down to the deck if I feel that there's going to be a strong breeze, strong winds.
There are several places where marks on a control line are critical, either to set up a control in a predetermined spot or to use as a reference when trimming the sails.
I have, for marks in this boat, I have a main sheet, which I think is probably the most important marking that I do. Like I have this mark, which not necessarily has any particular position on the boat, but it's just basically would tell you if you a reference point. So if you're going fast, you know exactly where the mark is, and if you're going slow, you try ease that a little bit and trim a little bit, and so it's a good reference point to get back. The next thing I have is the mast rake. Again, I don't play with that. I just have a one mark, which is 16 inches, and I live most of the time in 16 inches. If the breeze increase for over 20 knots, then I will rake the mast aft a little bit, maybe an inch and a half farther back. The next important mark I think is in the boat is that, well, first, of course, the upwind position, that is a black mark right by the end of the line. So that after that point is the crew cannot pull any harder than that. So this is the upwind. Both backstays will be with this black mark showing up, and as soon as we turn the mark, we're gonna go downwind, and I will. First position I will do is release to this first, the red mark, and then after that I would just kind of play in and out until I felt that is a good position. If the wind is real light, of course, we're going to have the mast a lot farther forward, and if the wind died down a little bit, I will, if the wind come up, I will bring the mast back a little bit, just for safety reasons.
And these triple ones are the danger.
That's after that is danger zone. So basically you have to be careful. If you didn't get the mast that far back, you could be in deep trouble.
Some star sailors use a main sheet block with a double purchase. This allows the sail to be eased or trimmed twice as fast at the windward or leeward mark by using both parts, or to fine-tune the sail with more purchase by using just one part. However, with this system, you cannot use a mark on the main sheet because it will not always be in the same place. The most important control systems on a star are the running backstays. There are three common setups. The original style uses tracks on deck. To make this system efficient, the block and tackle must work smoothly and be well within reach because of the large amount of adjustment necessary when going onto a run or back onto a beat. The next system has a gross adjustment on the running backstays, with a fine tune for the uppers and a block system for the lowers. The weakness of this is that when you use the fine tune, you must then also readjust the lowers each time. A recent development combines the strengths of the two earlier ones, using a gross adjustment to set the backstays, then fine-tuning with a separate block system for the upper and the lower. When rounding the leeward mark, the upper and lower will be preset at the same tension as the last beat. Also, because it is positioned farther forward, the leeward backstays don't have to be released on each tack. The hiking systems used also vary. There are two common ways to hook in or support the crew's harness. The wire and swage ball hook into the V-fitting on deck. When the crew goes to tack, this ball just pops out of the fitting. The problem areas include fraying of the wire and the ball sometimes not releasing cleanly. The two variations of the other system use a line on the harness and a clam cleat on the deck. The crew simply lays the line into the cleat to support their weight. When they tack, the line pulls straight out. The line must be changed when it shows any signs of wear. Because clothing got snagged and torn on the raised cleat, some star sailors have recessed the cleats into the edge of the deck. As you can see on this boat, it is faired into the deck so that there are no exposed edges. Hiking straps should be comfortable and easy to use. One problem with the conventional single hiking strap is that it is sometimes difficult to hook your feet under the new side during a tack. Jim uses a double strap, which virtually makes his tacking automatic. His feet are between the two straps, and when he tacks, they turn inside the straps and hike off the other side. He knows that the strap is there and can get out over the side faster. As mentioned earlier, both the skipper's and crew's hiking straps have adjustments so that they can be tightened for reaching. Vince has placed the cruise control so that the crew can adjust it.
Here is the crew hiking strap, which is a little farther back than most of the boats. I decided to have the hiking strap over here because the crew will be from this position to far forward, so he could adjust with his left hand or his right hand depending on the position he sits. So he will go from the position I am now to the position all the way in the front. He will never be over here right in the middle. So, and that would be in the reaching legs and downwind legs.
Let's get down to the business of setting up your star to go sailing. We'll begin with the mast out of the boat. Start with the spreaders. You need to cut a 1/2 inch notch out of the inboard end as shown. Now the spreader can pivot farther forward, allowing the main to go out further on a run without being obstructed by the spreader. But this does increase the danger of inverting the mast. Put a mark on the spreader 18 inches in from the tip. This will help as a guide for jib trim. Next, we adjust the length of the intermediate shrouds. Lay the mast on sawhorses or the ground with the groove side down. Pull the upper shroud down the mast and make a mark at the bearing surface, which is the inside bottom of the hull. Put another mark 2 3/4 inches down the mast. The bearing surface of the intermediate shroud should come right to this mark. Adjust it if necessary. Recently, some of the top sailors have switched to a continuous intermediate that comes all the way down to the shroud car to allow small tuning adjustments to be made without taking down the mast each time. Vince tapes the intermediate and the upper together to minimize the windage. When attaching the upper to the spreader, it is important to keep the rough edge of the crimped wire facing forward so that it doesn't chafe the sail. Our goal in tuning the mast is to keep it straight athwartships at all times. The first concern is that the mast partners and mast step are centered in the boat so that we don't start off with the mast bent sideways right at the deck. Now step the mast. Be sure that the back end of the trailer is blocked so that you can walk aft in the boat. One person holds the butt of the mast on a sponge or rag while the other walks the mast up. Lift the mast and lower it through the partners onto the mast step. Immediately attach the mast ram, as this alone will support the mast. Then go about connecting the forestay, shrouds, and the backstays. The upper shrouds will be fairly tight, so you must lean the mast forward and push down firmly on the shroud cars to get them onto their tracks. Place the cars so that the uppers are 15 feet, 1 5/8 inches forward from the corner of the transom on that side. Next, set the rake. A standard setting for the rake is to have the pin on the forestay 16 inches from the deck. This assumes that all forestays are exactly the same length. A more accurate method for duplicating the same rake from boat to boat is to mark the forestay where it lines up with the lower band on the mast. This is a fixed distance and is the same on all boats. Reattach the forestay and measure up to this point. When the pin measured 16 inches on Vince's boat, the mark on the forestay measured 2 feet 10 3/4 inches. Check the fore and aft position of the mast step. Measure from the aft edge of the heel of the mast to the plane of the transom at the aft deck. This number should be 14 feet 9 inches. Another way to check this is to attach the boom and measure the amount that the band extends beyond the plane of the transom. This should measure 1 to 2 inches. Now check the position of the shroud cars by sighting across the shrouds from off the boat. The lowers should just line up with the front edge of the mast. The uppers should be about 1 1/2 inches forward of the lowers. All that remains in pre-tuning the mast is to adjust the lowers while you are out sailing. Lay down on the deck, sighting up the luff of the sail. If the mast sags to leeward, tighten the lower. If it bows to windward, loosen the lower. Sail on both tacks, adjusting the shrouds until the mast is straight. Now that we have the boat set up well and the mast tuned, we need to look at how the various sail controls affect sail shape and then discuss how to optimize sail trim for different sailing conditions. In a star, the most important controls are those that affect mast bend. The lower backstay attaches to the mast at spreader level and controls the bend in the middle of the mast. This allows for very accurate and quick control of the shape of the main. Easing the lower backstay flattens the middle of the main and opens up the leech, depowering the sail. Tightening the lower straightens the mast, which makes the main fuller and more powerful with a tighter leech. The range of tensions goes from eased in very light air, quickly tightening it up to power the main as the breeze comes up, then slowly easing it to bleed power from the main to keep from getting overpowered as the wind bills further. The upper backstay controls the bend of the upper part of the mast and also affects headstay tension. Tightening the upper backstay increases the bend, flattening the top of the main and twisting the leech off to leeward. At the same time, it tightens the headstay, flattening the jib. When the upper backstay is eased, the mast straightens, making the upper main fuller and tighter leeched. The headstay sags more, creating a fuller jib with a higher angle of attack. In light winds, the upper backstay would be firm to keep the mast from pumping in waves. As the wind increases, the upper can be tightened slightly to help twist open the top of the main and depower the sail. The mast lever controls the bend of the lower part of the mast, but also functions to keep the mast from bouncing around in waves by locking the lever in the neutral position. Set the backstays to get the desired shape, then cleat the ram in this position. In choppy conditions, you might want to make the sail fuller and more powerful, moving the lever aft to straighten the lower mast. The main sheet is also a very critical control. Small adjustments can greatly affect power and pointing ability, as well as the balance of the helm. Trimming harder tightens the leech, increasing power and pointing, but the sail will also stall more easily. In waves, you want to twist the sail more to allow a wider range of steering, concentrating more on speed and less on pointing. As you become overpowered, you also want to twist the main to depower. On average, the boom will be about 7 to 8 inches off the deck at the stern in moderate conditions. The rake adjustment becomes important too, both for balance of the boat and for the tension of the main leech. As mentioned before, begin with 16 inches of rake. In windy conditions, the rake can be increased. The main sheet can't be trimmed as tightly, and this depowers the boat by twisting off the top of the main as well as opening up the top of the jib. The outhaul effectively controls the fullness of the lower third of the main. Generally set the outhaul slightly loose in under 6 knots of wind and gradually tighten it as the wind increases to flatten the foot of the sail. Ease the outhaul on broad reaches and runs. The Cunningham affects the draft position and fullness of the main. In light air, the Cunningham should be slack. As the wind increases, tension the Cunningham to just remove horizontal wrinkles from the luff. Tightening the Cunningham flattens the sail, moves the draft forward, and opens the leach, so it helps to depower the main as it gets windy. The Traveler is being used less and less. In fact, newer boats are being built without one. Keep it centerline and control the sail with the main sheet and backstay controls. In heavy winds and rough seas, you may want to drop the Traveler several inches to depower and give you a wider angle of attack. One of the most important subtleties in sail trim adjustment is achieved with shroud tension. The upper shrouds control the amount of prebend in the top of the mast and can vary boat to boat to account for differences in crew weight. If the top of the main seems too full and stalls too easily, or if you have a light crew, you can tighten the uppers to add prebend, flattening the top of the main and depowering the sail. Conversely, if the top of the main looks too flat and the upper telltale never stalls, or if you have a heavy crew, easing the uppers will make the sail fuller, tighten the leach, and generate more power. When you adjust the uppers, be sure to check the lowers and intermediates to keep the mast straight athwartships. This adjustment of prebend is critical and may require some time to find the proper setting for your specific needs. Once you achieve this setting for the uppers, use it for all conditions. In very windy conditions, you can tighten the lowers more to pop the middle of the mast to windward slightly, helping to depower the main. Let's review how the various controls affect the main by looking at the adjustments you would make to power up or depower the sail. The position of the jib lead is critical in trimming the jib. These measurements should be made on shore and marked. First, for fore and aft position, measure from where the headstay intersects the deck back to the center of the jib car, positioning the car 7 feet 3 1/2 inches aft. The fore and aft adjustment affects the fullness of the foot of the jib and the tightness or twist of the leach. Moving the lead forward effectively pulls the leach tighter and makes the foot fuller. Moving the lead aft pulls more on the foot, flattening the lower part of the sail and allowing the leach to twist more open up high. Move the car about 1/2 inch forward in light air and about 1/2 inch back in heavy air. Next is the athwartship position of the jib lead, which affects the slot between the main and the jib. Measure out from the center of the mast to the block and place the block 14 inches from the center line as a standard setting. In very light air, you might open it up to 14 1/2 inches. In smooth water and moderate breeze, you may be able to squeeze it in to 13 1/2 inches. As the breeze builds, you will want to begin to open up the slot again because the main will be twisting off to leeward, so move the lead out to 15 inches. Often when you are having boat speed problems, it is caused by the jib lead being too far inboard. The jib halyard should be set so that the tack of the jib is about 1 inch off the deck. The jib Cunningham should be tensioned just enough to remove the wrinkles in the luff at all times. Now with the jib set in creases, the jib will need to be trimmed tighter to keep the leach at this mark, and when the wind gets lighter, the jib sheet will need to be eased. If the leach of the jib is hitting the spreader, the tack may be raised too high off the deck, or the mast might be too bent. A headstay tension, which controls the sag of the jib luff, is in turn controlled by the backstays, particularly the upper backstay. The jib can be made slightly fuller for choppy water or a light spot by easing the upper and creating more headstay sag. When the upper backstay is adjusted, however, you may need to adjust the lower backstay and the mast lever to keep the optimal mainsail shape. The goal in sailing upwind is to get the sails and mast working most efficiently for the conditions. When racing against other boats, you will have a very good measure of how your boat speed is. Otherwise, you will have to feel how your boat is going. The helm should be almost balanced with just a slight weather helm, as you can see here. If the boat is overpowered, you will have too much weather helm and will need to depower the main. When the boat feels sluggish and underpowered, or if you don't have any punch through the waves, you need to power up the sails. As a general rule, lean towards depowering because the star is basically already overpowered. Vince talks about how he sets up his boat in 3 different wind conditions.
I have 3 different setups. One is like from 0 to 5 knots. I will have a problem with the leech being too tight in the mainsail being in general too full. And at that point, I have to actually induce sag, not just sag in the forestay, but I have to induce bend on the mast. And to do that, I will pull the lever forward, and to avoid the mast from going too far forward, I pull the upper backstay a little bit. And that would be from 0 to 5. As soon as the wind starts to pick up a little bit, at that point I start to desire a maximum power I can get out of the mainsail, the sails in general. And to do that, I will have, then I will start to trim the lower backstay. I have at that point no lever forward, and I be trimming the main sheet quite hard, trying to get the sail as much power I can get out of the sail. And come to a point then you overpower, and as soon as you overpower, you're going to be just doing reverse of that. You're going to be easing the main sheet a little bit, and again the lower backstay is going to be eased a little bit too, and of course the alt hull is going to be trimmed harder, even harder than before.
This brings up the important concept of changing gears from one condition to the next. In puffy winds, you are constantly changing gears to optimize your performance. Vince and Jim explain what they would do as they sail into more breeze and begin to get overpowered.
The controls in my area would be, the first one would be the backstay. I will release the lower backstay and let the mast bend a little bit more, and let some of the power go out of the mainsail. The next thing I would do is trim the alt hull a little bit to make the sail a little flatter. In general, just making the sail flatter in everywhere, from the bottom all the way up. And I think Jim, go ahead, Jim.
Well, what we would do is I would slowly start sheeting the jib in a little bit tighter, and then just as soon as it was possible for me to get my entire weight over the side of the boat into the mini hike position, I would try and get out there, lowering our center of gravity, getting more power out of the boat.
Now that we have discussed the trimming of the sails upwind, let's go through the different points of sail and cover sail handling and boat handling. Tacking techniques vary depending on the breeze. In very light wind, smoothness and patience are the keys. Begin the tack by moving the crew weight in slightly to create weather helm. The skipper slowly turns the boat. Too sharp of a turn will stall the boat and lose distance to weather. As the boat comes into the wind, both the skipper and crew roll the boat to windward to keep the sails full with apparent wind and help the boat through the turn. Since both the windward and leeward backstays are trimmed tight going upwind, the crew concentrates on tacking the jib and balancing the boat, making sure that the boat does not come out of the tack too flat. In windier conditions, the trick for the skipper is to turn the boat smoothly and to come out of the tack at the right angle. You can give a slight roll, but the turn is quicker, and the most important consideration is to get over to the new windward side and hike out to help accelerate the boat on the new tack. As you can see here, when the crew doesn't get out over the side right away, the boat heels and creates a lot of helm, stalling the boat. There is no secret to consistent tacks other than practice. In light air, the crew helps steer by balancing the boat. You can see in these sequences how Jim moves his weight to react to changes in wind velocity. Once the crew is hiking over the side, they must be careful not to drag in the water, either in waves or during a lull. Here Jim responds to a puff by raising his arms out to his head and getting maximum leverage. One of the most difficult conditions in which to sail the Star is marginal hiking conditions. Vince and Jim share some of their thoughts on hiking techniques.
You have to be agile enough to go in and out of the boat, and at the same time you cannot bounce this mast, you cannot shake the boat, and so it demands a lot of preparation, a lot of physical preparation. It has to be a very strong crew to be able to do a good job on that. Like not grabbing the backstays, like it's something in my boat. I won't let my crew grab the backstays, and because every time he grabs that, he shakes the whole rig and the sail. So I think is the other position that he can be. It's windy around here, huh? And the other position is just like what we call the thin hiking, which is like halfway. It's not all the way fully hike, but it's halfway position. Like you basically maybe you do it over here on the show.
Just being out like this, so that you're out of the waves, but you can also, from here, you can move just with your upper body, moving your weight in and out, trying to keep as low as possible so the skipper has visibility, and trying to reduce some windage if you can.
As you approach the weather mark to go onto a reach or a run, the skipper should make sure that the main sheet is free to run. As the boat rounds the mark, keep your weight to windward to help the boat head off. The main must be eased quickly as well, or the boat will not head off, so the crew must ease the leeward backstays to allow the main to go out. On a reach, the jib is eased so that the lower half of the jib is properly trimmed. The lead can be moved outboard, or if you have a barber haul, it should be pulled out both to open up the slot and to reduce the upper jib twist. On a run or very broad reach, the crew immediately pulls out the whisker pole, attaching it to the jib clew ring and pushing it out to windward as the skipper trims the windward jib sheet to fill the jib. Vince has a cleat positioned after the jib sheet ratchet so that he can trim the jib when Jim is putting up the whisker pole and also when Jim is sitting forward of the ratchet on a run. On a reach, it is most important to keep the boat flat and the helm balanced by using your weight, mainsail trim, and steering. Here, Jim hikes hard as Vince eases the main and bears off to keep the boat flat as a puff hits. If the boat heels to leeward, it creates windward helm, which is compensated by pulling the tiller to windward, increasing the drag. Due to the shape of the Star's hull, it will also plane or surf more quickly when it is flat. The main and jib Cunninghams can be eased when sailing downwind, as can the outhaul. In light or moderate breeze, easing the upper backstay will straighten the mast and make the jib fuller, but too much sag on the tight reach will be slow. On a broad reach or run, you want to ease the backstays and ram the mast forward at the deck. In general, the mast should be straight and raked as far forward as you can. The danger here is of inverting the mast. When sailing on a run, you need to heel to windward to balance the helm. The crew sits forward by the mast on the windward side and helps steer the boat with their weight. Here Jim is watching the wave pattern and hikes hard to head the boat off to catch a wave. The main should be eased so that the boom is perpendicular to the center line of the boat. The boom vang controls the twist of the main leech on the run and is a critical adjustment. You can see in these shots the range of twist that the vang allows. Too loose and the top of the main spills wind. Too tight and the main is choked. On average, the top batten should parallel the boom. The whisker pole should be trimmed as far aft as possible without flattening the jib foot too much. Jibing in heavy air is probably the hairiest maneuver in a Star. It is absolutely critical that Jim pulls on the leeward backstay as the main is being trimmed in, and releases the old windward backstay before the boom hits it. As Vince bears off to jibe, he trims the main in rapidly from the boom. The leeward backstay being trimmed may help pull in the boom. As the wind catches the leech of the main and jibes it, Vince releases the main sheet quickly and steers off under the main to keep the boat balanced. Once he has steered this S course, he comes up to his course in control. If you do not steer an S course, the force of the main filling on the leeward side will heel the boat and head you up. If the boom hits the water, it can trim the main in more, causing you to head up further and possibly broach. On a reach-to-reach jibe, Jim pre-cleats the jib sheet on the new leeward side, switches the backstays, then hikes and trims the jib. When jibing on a run, once the backstays are trimmed, Jim immediately switches the whisker pole as Vince trims it back. Jim moves back to his forward position. Approaching the leeward mark, the outhaul, Cunninghams, and jib lead should be reset, and the mast should be put back in position with the windward backstays trimmed tight. Here Vince trims the leeward jib sheet as Jim removes the pole and stores it. As the bow approaches the mark, Vince rapidly trims the main, which helps turn the boat. Jim trims the jib, but does not over-trim it during the turn. Jim hikes out as the boat turns to close hauled, and trims the leeward backstays, which you can see hanging to leeward, so that they can tack immediately. Jim ducks under the boom and goes right out on the new tack. Sailing downwind in light air is not exciting stuff, but it takes great patience and concentration to do well. It is important to sit still, minimizing movement so that the sails and rig don't get shaken around. Here, Vince and Jim approach a leeward mark in light air, and all their movements are smooth and gentle. Hopefully we have answered many of the questions you may have had about